I have a 1991 Jeep Wrangler with a loose steering column, and I thought it was a home fix-it project. I thought I would try to fix it without taking it to the shop. To help me understand how to do this, I have a Chilton manual that says that there's 8 easy steps to replace the steering column. The first step is to remove the steering column, is to make sure that the negative cable is removed from the battery so that you don't get any arcing from the battery when you do the electrical work. The second step of removing the steering column is to match mark the upper and intermediate steering shaft columns with paint. In the book it shows it's very easy to do, but I found it hard to get down there with red paint, as you see, and match mark the two pieces. Before I can do the third step as outlined in the manual, I have to take all the instrument panel shrouding off, as you see here, and to do that I had to remove a few of the screws, and then I'll pop this out of here. Part of step 3 was to remove the shroud, which we did, which is easy with just a few screws. The next part was to remove the brackets around the toe of the upper steering column. That was not easy. I used the size 13 metric with an extension with the help of an air wrench to get the brackets off. It was glued or had the gasket on it. It took a while to pry it off. Another step for number 3 is to loosen the pinch bolt down here on between the intermediate shaft and the upper shaft. It wasn't too bad, and I had to use a number 11 metric to loosen it. The next step will be to loosen the bolts on the steering column and to disconnect all the wiring harnesses. Another part of step 3 was to disconnect all of the harness wires on the steering column. They're all different sizes and shapes, so they shouldn't be hard to put back. And another part is, of course, to finish these bolts to hold the steering column in place. I've removed this one at the size 14 metric, and when I remove this other one, I should be able to slide the steering column completely out of the cab. Okay, I've loosened all the bolts, and in theory, I should be able to pull the steering column straight out. So let's see what happens. It looks like it's pinched down there on the pinch bolt a little bit. So we'll go down there and check the pinch bolt, make sure it's loose. I had to take the pinch bolt completely out down below, and that allowed me to get the steering column out. But in so doing, I found another set of wires that are on top of the steering column that look like they'll be fun to disconnect before I can remove the steering column. As I thought, getting the choke off, or the wires out, required to take the choke off, which was pretty easy to do with a ratchet wrench. But the wires are still connected, and I'll have to reach in and undo those. The wires, as I thought, were difficult to undo. I had to turn the steering column to the side and get this plug and this black plug out. And looked like it was one plug, was actually two. Once I determined that and did these little flippers here, I was able to get the plugs out. Well, now that I have everything disconnected, the steering column should slide straight out, and with no luck, it will come right out. Voila, we have a steering column out. Well, we completed step 3, but in so doing, we also completed steps 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And the wiring part was the most difficult part, which was the ignition switch, the dimmer switch, the turn signal, window shield wiper, cruise control, and park lock cable. All those were somewhat difficult, and the toe plate was pretty easy to take out. That completes the 8 steps as we went through the process of getting the steering column out of the Jeep. The next step is to take the steering column down to the shop and disassemble it so we can find the bearing that's bad, and then we'll replace the bearing and put it back together. Once we have the steering column in the shop, is to remove the horn assembly, and then underneath that 3 Phillips screws to take off the next part, and then we need to undo this bolt and use a steering wheel puller to remove the steering wheel. The steering wheel should pop right off. I see it's coming now. The next step is to remove this brass bracket to get the O-ring off the center here. And to do that, you have to push this brass piece down using a special tool for taking this apart. Okay, finally, after fussing around with a couple of screwdrivers, I was able to get the snap ring loose, and now the rest of this assembly comes apart. I'll just set the snap ring aside, and then we'll take the rest of it apart. Pop off the turn signal lever, which really just pulls out of the side of it like that, just pops out. At this point, I have all the pieces taken off, and the bad part of the steering column is this ball joint down inside there. And at this point, I think any average homeowner would then quit and go buy a new steering column to put in the 1991 Jeep Wrangler.